The call came in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. in Mallorca, a time when even Rafael Nadal, long used to the demanding schedule of international tennis, expected only complete silence. He answered anyway, initially thinking it was just a routine matter from the Rafa Nadal Academy about one of the young players he guides, or some minor logistical problem that could not wait until morning. But the voice on the other end was far from calm. It was urgent, tense, and almost panicked. The Upper Austria Ladies Lindt Open, a tournament with more than 35 years of proud history, was facing a major crisis. Ticket sales, which organizers had confidently expected months earlier, had suddenly crashed, leaving entire sections empty. Sponsors, who were usually reliable partners, had grown restless and were now questioning their involvement, even threatening to pull out completely. The shocking reason was simple. Alex Eala was not in the main draw. The 20-year-old Filipina star, whose explosive rise had energized tournaments around the world, had been excluded after her ranking fell from number 29 to number 45 following her loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. On paper, the decision seemed logical, but in reality it changed everything, because this was not just any missing player, this was the heart of the draw. She was the same athlete whose presence had overwhelmed crowds in Melbourne, driven huge ticket surges in Dubai, and caused her jerseys to sell out within hours in Miami. Without her, the entire atmosphere and excitement disappeared instantly. Sponsors noticed right away, as these were the same brands that had seen her merchandise outperform all expectations, her face dominate social media, and her real drawing power far exceed what any ranking could show. They delivered a clear and uncomfortable message: give her a wild card or prepare to lose millions in revenue. By the time the full situation was explained, Nadal was no longer lying in bed. He was sitting upright, wide awake, taking in the enormous scale of what he was hearing. This was not merely one tournament in trouble, it was a deeper clash between long-standing tennis traditions and a new reality shaped by global fan attention, emotional connection, and cultural influence. When he learned what the organizers and possibly the Women's Tennis Association were considering next, even Nadal, the undisputed king of clay who had witnessed almost everything the sport could offer, was left stunned. April 2026 inches, Linz, Austria. The Upper Austria Ladies Lindt Open was meant to be a joyful celebration of its 35th edition, a milestone that few events reach, promising a week of top-level tennis, bright lights, and full stands. Established champions like Katerina Alexandrova and Jelena Ostapenko were set to headline, and prize money had been raised by more than $140,000 from the previous year to show growth and ambition. Everything appeared perfectly prepared for success, until the early sales reports arrived and turned celebration into panic. Pre-sale figures were devastating, with attendance projections based on decades of steady growth collapsing dramatically. Ticket sales had dropped more than 40% compared to the year before, and sessions that always sold out quarterfinals, semifinals, and the final were now barely half full. A serious financial loss threatened the tournament's very future. Everyone knew the cause. The powerful Eala effect, the same force that had crashed ticketing systems in Miami and created a 48% surge in Dubai, was completely missing. Alex Eala, the 20-year-old Filipina who had become the most captivating figure in women's tennis, was absent from the main draw because her ranking had slipped after a fourth-round defeat to Karolina Muchova in Miami. Fans who had traveled from far away, from Melbourne to Miami, simply stayed home. For the organizers, the irony was painful. After 35 years of building strong local sponsor ties, heavy marketing investments, player programs, and facility improvements to create a dependable and respected event, none of it seemed to matter when Alex Eala was not on the draw. In today's women's tennis, ranking numbers simply could not match the irresistible pull of a true phenomenon. She was not merely a player, she had become a movement, and Linz had just discovered what running a tournament without that movement felt like. Nothing else mattered. The fans had not come for the event itself, they had come for Alex Eala, and when she was absent, they stayed away. What was supposed to be a standard sponsor meeting to review finances and discuss future plans quickly turned tense the moment ticket sales numbers were revealed. Sponsors had been closely watching the Eala phenomenon for months. They had seen the 48% ticket increase in Dubai, the Miami Open ticketing system overwhelmed by Filipino supporters, and merchandise reports where her jerseys outsold every other player combined. Their calculation was straightforward. Alex Eala meant revenue. the Lens tournament, with its modest sales and older fan base, was no longer delivering the returns they expected. Voices grew sharper and demands became direct. When officials explained that her lower ranking had kept her out of the main draw, the response was instant and firm. Get her in by any means necessary, wild card, special exemption, whatever it takes. If she is not playing, we are not paying. This ultimatum created shockwaves throughout the organization. For the first time in its 5-year history, the Lind Open was not just organizing matches, but desperately trying to handle a crisis it had never anticipated, one that no planning, spreadsheet, or past experience could have prepared them for. It was not about logistics or prize money anymore. It was about one player who had grown bigger than the sport itself. WTA rules were clear. Wild cards were at the organizer's discretion and traditionally given to local talents or promising players who had not qualified through ranking. Normally, a number 45 player like Alex Eala would not be eligible, but these were not normal times. The tournament faced financial ruin, sponsors were ready to withdraw, ticket sales had plunged, and the only athlete capable of filling the stands and restoring energy was being blocked by a ranking system that failed to capture her true worth. Inside the WTA, talks were reportedly intense and heated. Some insisted rules must be followed without exception, while others argued that rules should serve the sport's growth, and if they were now hurting it, they needed to be re-examined. After all, rankings measured on-court results but not influence, charisma, or the power to bring fans together. One anonymous official summed it up perfectly. Alex is not just a tennis player, she is a phenomenon, and if the rules are stopping the sport from thriving, then maybe the rules need to evolve. This situation highlighted a bigger tension in modern tennis, the struggle between strict structure and exciting spectacle, between regulations and real cultural impact. For the WTA, it was no longer a simple tournament choice, but a test of staying relevant in an era where one player could generate attention far beyond traditional metrics. In the middle of this storm, Alex Ayala's name held the power to either save or completely reshape the Lens Open. She had already proven beyond doubt that she could pack stadiums, sell merchandise rapidly, and attract new audiences to tennis. That kind of influence carried real value, and the WTA had to find a way to recognize it, whether through wild cards, adjusted rules, or rethinking how rankings reflect a player's actual impact. When the final decision was made, it was completely unprecedented. The WTA officially granted Alex Eala a wild card into the Lens Open main draw, citing extraordinary circumstances and recognizing her major role in expanding women's tennis. The reaction was swift, and divided critics accused the WTA of unfairly changing its own rules for a player who had not earned her place by ranking, while others saw it as a necessary step forward that acknowledged how the sport and its fans were evolving. The Eala effect had been talked about in tennis for months, but the Lens crisis pushed it into new territory. The key question was why one player's presence could be so vital to a tournament's financial survival. The answer lay in deep connection. For the Filipino diaspora, Alex Eala is far more than an athlete. She is a powerful symbol of hope and possibility, a girl from Manila who rose to compete on the world's greatest stages, visible, celebrated, and unstoppable. She represents the overseas Filipino worker dream, that hard work, sacrifice, and belief can create something remarkable. When players from countries like the Philippines, where tennis opportunities are limited, reach the top, stadiums do not just fill up, they come alive with pride. Every cheer carries extra meaning, every jersey tells a story, and every fan reminds everyone that representation truly matters. Alex Eala does not simply play tennis, she connects continents, cultures, and communities. In Lens, that connection was about to return, and the stadium was prepared to experience what millions already understood. Her presence is more than just a match, it is pure inspiration in action. A veteran referee at a Davis Cup event had noted earlier that year that people cheer for their country as much as for the player, and that bond turns into real economic power. In Dubai, her presence boosted ticket sales by 48%. In Miami, her jerseys outsold everyone else combined. In Lens, her absence had pushed the event toward disaster. The numbers were undeniable. Alex Ayala's participation generated millions through tickets, merchandise, and media attention, while her absence cost organizers millions. The WTA, which had worked for years to grow the game globally, had finally found a player who could actually deliver that growth, but struggled to know exactly how to manage it. For Alex herself, the wild card into the Linz Open was more than just entry into a tournament. It was powerful validation that her worth to tennis could not be measured by ranking points alone. Her ranking had slipped from 29 to 45 after the fourth-round loss to Karolina Muchova at Miami, when the 390 points from her impressive 2025 semifinal run expired. The clay season now lay ahead Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros, with its slower courts, higher bounces, longer rallies, and the need for extra patience and smart tactics that hard courts do not require. Yet she carried something no ranking could ever capture, the unwavering love and support of an entire nation that would follow her anywhere. In Linz, she would enter as the number 7 seed behind players like Alexandrova, Svitolina, Samsonova, Ostapenko, Navarro, and Raducanu. She would face more experienced clay court specialists who had won titles on the surface, but she would also bring thousands of Filipino fans who had traveled all the way to Austria just to watch her. "I could win the whole thing or lose in the first round," she had said in a podcast with former world number 1 Andy Roddick. "If I don't get the win here, I'll get it somewhere else." Those words reflected the mindset of a future champion, and with the wild card secured, she now had the opportunity to prove it. The Linz Open had stood on the edge of financial collapse, with collapsed ticket sales and sponsors ready to walk away, all because Alex Eala was not playing. The WTA, facing a crisis of its own creation, eventually gave in to the pressure and granted the wild card. Rafael Nadal, who had trained Eala at his academy for 7 years, watched the entire situation unfold from Mallorca and remarked that he had never seen a tournament's financial survival depend so heavily on one player who was not even in the original draw, calling it truly unprecedented. As Alex prepares for the full clay swing in Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros, she carries the knowledge that her value to the sport goes far beyond numbers. Though her clay court record remains modest and the so-called Czech curse on that surface is still unbroken, she possesses something far stronger than any statistic: the passionate support of a nation that refuses to be silenced. The big question remains, was the WTA right to award Alex Eala that wild card? 1-3-S fast.